Hello, middle schoolers. My name is Miss Smullen, and today I'm going to be guiding you through your visual arts weekly lesson. Today, I would like to talk to you about something called positive and negative space. For this lesson, you're going to need a few items to complete the assignment. First, you're going to need a pencil to write down your answers. You'll need 2 sheets of paper, one to write down answers with, and the other to create your work of art. You'll need a simple object that you feel comfortable drawing. This can be anything you find around the house, something as simple as a pair of scissors, or maybe a light bulb. You may also choose to use some other art materials that you may have around the house. If you have some extra markers or Sharpies, colored pencils, or crayons, any of those items will work. Basically, you can use whatever materials you can draw with. All right, let's get started. Today's objective is to identify positive and negative space in works of art and create your own example of positive and negative space in your artwork. The first thing we need to do to be able to identify positive and negative space is define what positive and negative space is. So let's start with positive space. Positive space is the main objects in a work of art. I refer to this as the stuff. Negative space is the extra things in the work of art that surround the positive space. I usually refer to this as everything else. So, if you're looking at a painting of a cat, the cat would be the stuff in the artwork, the main object, so the cat would be the positive space. The cat, being the positive space, is surrounded by lots of other things in the background. These extra things that surround the main object is the negative space. Let's look at an example of a work of art. This work of art is by Lane York. It's entitled The Curious Effects of Clean Linen. Look closely. Can you pick out the positive and negative space? Let's take a closer look before we decide. The easiest way to identify the positive space in a work of art is to complete this sentence. This artwork shows a picture of a blank. On your paper, write down your answer. This artwork shows a picture of a blank. What did you write as your answer? If you wrote something like man or person, then you've identified the positive space in this artwork. The positive space in this artwork by Lane York is the man, which is a white figure in the center. The negative space is everything else, including the red and the black blocks at the top and the bottom of the painting. Great job! You may be starting to wonder, why is negative space important? It seems like positive space is the only thing that really matters. And since negative space is extra stuff, there's no need to really learn about it. However, positive and negative space work together to complete the whole composition of an artwork and to help the viewer construct their own meaning from the image. Negative space can also be used as a tool to help you when you're drawing a work of art. Look at this image, for example. Many of my students tell me that they find it particularly challenging to draw people. However, if I focus on the negative space in this image, I'll find it much easier to draw. First, I'm going to look for shapes in the negative space around his legs. First off, I can see that there's a triangle located between his legs, making up the space between his knees, ankle, and leg. This is a very simple image to draw, but I'm not going to stop there. Next, I'm going to find another simple shape that's below his front leg. This shape is made up from the space between his knee, ankle, and toe. Next, I notice that there's 2 areas that almost look like perfect rectangles. One is near his arms, and the other is near his back legs. If I continue to look, I will also notice that there's a right angle that is made up of the space between his face and his arms. Now let's take the picture away. I'm left with the shapes that are in the negative space.
This provides me with sort of a map to figure out how to draw this person. I know his knee is located between the front rectangle and the triangles. His first foot is near the second rectangle. And I know that his back, leg, and body make its way back up the shapes. And I can complete his head and arms between the right angle. By focusing on the negative shapes, I'm able to provide some guidance on how to complete this drawing.
Let's continue to look at examples where positive and negative space work together to help the viewer construct their own meaning from an image. I would like us to start practicing identifying the positive and the negative space in a work of art. Take this example. Many of you have probably seen an image similar to this in many of your art classes. Study the shapes that you see in this image, and now take your pencil and write down what you believe the positive space in this image is. Take a moment now and write your answer. After you've written down what you believe the positive space is, I would like you now to identify what the negative space in this artwork is. Pick your pencil back up and write down what is the negative space in this artwork. Please do that now. Okay, great. Let's review your answers. Some of you may have said the positive space in this image is the white area in the center, because when you look at this image, you see a vase. The vase takes up most of the space in the center. It's the main object in the work of art, and so the vase is the positive space. If the vase is the positive space, then everything around it, all this black area, is the negative space. However, that's only one of two correct answers. Maybe some of you, when you looked at this image, did not see the white vase as the positive space. Perhaps you identified two faces looking in from the sides of the paper. If you identified two faces as the positive space and the white space in the center as the negative space, you were also correct. Both answers are correct when you are identifying positive and negative space. This demonstrates how positive and negative space work together to create a composition in the artwork and help the viewer construct their own meaning from the image. Very good. So far, you've done a great job of identifying the positive and the negative space in works of art. I'd like to show you two more quick examples, and then we're going to start on your assignment for the week. The first example I'm going to show you very quickly just over my shoulder. As you quickly look at this image, I would like you to think about what you think the positive space of this image is. It's going to go really quick, so make sure you're paying attention. Are you ready? Let's do it. I would like you to write down what you believe the positive space is in the image you just saw. Please take your pencil and write that down now. If you said that you believed that the positive space in the image I showed you was a tree, I'd say you're correct. However, let's take a closer look at this image. This image is a logo from the Pittsburgh Zoo in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you look at how the artist designed this image, they created a tree as the positive space, but you can see that in the negative space of this image, there is a gorilla and a lion representing the zoo. This is a great example about how positive and negative space work together to help the viewer glean meaning from a work of art. The last image I'd like to show you is similar to an artwork that we looked at earlier in our lesson. This artwork is very similar to the work of Lane York. If you remember, we looked at a picture that Lane York created of a man in white surrounded by blocks of red and black. Now, if you're trying to create an image of an object that's white, you could find that quite challenging, especially if you only have white paper. For example, let's say you're trying to create an image of a white cat. If you only focus on the positive space, you might find that you have an image that's not very interesting. You could attempt to add detail to this cat, but then it would no longer be pure white, and maybe that's what you're trying to do in your artwork. A trick for creating something that is completely white on white paper is to not focus on the positive space of the image, but instead focus on the negative space that surrounds that image. If you created this artwork more like this, using colored markers to fill in all the negative space so that the only thing left white is the positive space, you could create a really interesting work of art using a surprising use of positive and negative space. All right, I think we've had enough practice identifying the positive and the negative space. I think it's time for us to start the assignment so that you can try it. For this portion of our lesson, you're going to need the white drawing paper that we set aside at the beginning of the lesson, a pencil, markers, or any type of drawing material you'd like to use. And you'll also need the simple object I asked you to set aside at the beginning of the lesson. I'm going to use a pair of scissors, but you can use anything you can find at home. Let's sit down and get to work. Now that we've gathered all our materials, let's get to work. The first thing I'd like you to do is take your simple object that you've chosen and draw it with a pencil on your paper. It's best to use a pencil in case you make a mistake. So as you can see, I've already drawn mine in pencil, but I'm going to go ahead and outline it in Sharpie so that hopefully you can see it a little bit better. You want to draw your image so that it fills the space of your page and isn't too small so that there's too much negative space. You'd like the positive space and the negative space to be as even as you can, though this could be challenging depending on the object that you've chosen. After you've drawn your image large in the center of your paper, you're going to take something that you can use to make a straight line, like the edge of a paper, or a ruler if you have one, and you are going to divide your image into two sections. So I'm just drawing a line straight across my paper. I drew my line kind of diagonally through my object. You could do it horizontally or vertically, or if you really are up for a challenge, you could make a squiggled line or a zigzag line across your page. Now, you're going to need to decide which side of your page you are going to demonstrate mastery of positive space and which side of your page you will try to demonstrate mastery of negative space. In order to decide, I'm going to label them. I think the first part of my picture will be the positive space side. So I'm going to write positive space along the top edge of my paper. The other side of my image will be for the negative space. So I'm going to also label that area. Now that I have these two areas labeled, I want you to think about what the positive space is in this half of the image that I've labeled positive space. Think about, in this image, what the positive space would be. If you said the scissors is the positive space, you're right. So in this area, I am going to color all of the positive space. I'm going to take my time and fill in my object with Sharpie, or you can use pencil or whatever drawing materials you have. And this will demonstrate that this area will show positive space. Your other side of the paper that is labeled negative space should be colored to show where the negative space is in your image. So think about this side of the paper. What is the negative space? If you said the negative space is anything that is not the scissors, then you're correct. So on this side, I'm going to color in the areas that are not the scissors or not the main object of the work of art. So that's the space inside the handle and the space all around the scissors. Now, if you take your time and you work really hard, you might end up with an example that looks something like this. As you can see, I've demonstrated my mastery of positive and negative space, and I've demonstrated that I'm able to identify those things in this work of art. I've labeled positive space at the top, and I've colored in the object, the main object of my artwork. The other side I've labeled negative space, and I've colored in all the space that surrounds the positive space, or the negative. This may be not very challenging for some of my advanced artists out there, so if you choose, here comes the extension. Start off your work the same way you did in this example. Draw out your object, divide it into two sections, label one positive and negative. However, if you'd like to do the extension, you are going to make a key to tell your teacher what colors will represent the positive space and what colors will represent the negative space. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my positive space be warm colors. So colors like pink, orange, and red. And I'm going to make my negative space be cool colors. Colors like teal, like purple, and like green. Now in the extension, I'm going to add designs to the positive space in the top half using the colors that I've selected in the key. In the negative space, I'm going to fill all the negative space with the colors I've chosen in the key. You can be as creative as you like and fill up your artwork with colors that represent the positive space and colors that represent the negative space. For something a little extra, you can then add the opposite space in black. The opposite in black. So in the extension, you use warm colors to represent positive space and black to represent negative space. And you use black to represent positive space and cool colors to represent negative space. By the end of this week, you should have completed one of these assignments where you will demonstrate your mastery of positive and negative space. As a reminder, our objective today was to identify positive and negative space in works of art and create your own example of positive and negative space in art. If you're able to complete this week's assignments, you've demonstrated your mastery of this objective. If you'd like to share any of your work, I'd love to see what you come up with. Please tag me on Twitter at ArtWithSmullen. Special shout out goes to Stuart Hobson Middle School. Just wanted to say I miss you all terribly and I hope we get to see you soon. Tune back in next week where we'll build on this background knowledge and continue this unit. Thanks so much. Have a great week and stay creative. Bye.